The photo hit the internet like a match thrown into dry grass. A quick kiss frozen in pixels, Liz Woods and Gino side by side, and before anyone stopped to breathe, the story was already written by strangers who wanted it to be messy, scandalous, and humiliating. Because that is how reality TV fandom feeds itself when it smells blood. People rushed to judgment, timelines were twisted, loyalty was questioned, and Liz's name started trending for reasons that had nothing to do with her actual life, until the ground shifted under that narrative and the truth started to leak out, slow and inconvenient, because the image was not what it looked like, the moment was not what fans wanted it to be, and the chaos had already done its job. That is where this stops being gossip and turns into fallout, because almost immediately the conversation moved from who kissed who to why Liz was even in that space to begin with, and why her personal boundaries kept getting treated like public property, especially after she made it clear she was engaged to someone off-camera, long-term, and intentionally private. By the way, I am Olavia, and this is TLC Drama File US, and if you want receipts, context, and stories that do not insult your intelligence, subscribe and stay close. And tell me in the comments what you thought that photo meant before you heard anything else, because your first instinct matters. Here, as the kiss rumor collapsed, something heavier stepped into the frame. Liz's health, her cancer history, and the quiet reality that her body had already been through more than most people arguing online would ever face, which reframed the entire situation in a way no viral post ever could. This was not a flirty slip or a storyline tease. This was a woman dealing with serious medical stress, while her name got dragged for clicks, and the speed of that switch should make anyone uncomfortable. When truth moves slower than outrage, somebody always profits. So the real question is not who kissed who, but who benefits when confusion spreads faster than facts, and why that pattern keeps repeating every time Liz tries to move forward. After the cameras stopped rolling, the breakup did not suddenly turn into peace, because relationships like Liz and Big Ed's do not end cleanly when the dynamic itself was never clean to begin with, and stripping away the jokes, the memes, and the easy insults leaves behind a pattern worth looking at without cruelty. Liz walked away carrying more than a broken engagement. She walked away from a relationship where control often hid behind concern, where exposure was framed as honesty, and where her life kept becoming content long after she asked for privacy. Big Ed did not need to raise his voice or throw insults for the imbalance to exist, because power does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it sits quietly in who gets to speak, who gets believed, and who keeps access, even after love ends. Post-breakup, Liz tried to rebuild off camera, choosing a partner the audience has not seen, choosing silence over spectacle, choosing distance from the chaos that once defined her public image, and that choice alone tells you how deep the scars ran. When someone spends years explaining their feelings on television, the instinct to protect what remains becomes survival, not secrecy, and yet her past never stopped following her, because fragments of her life kept resurfacing in places they did not belong. In my opinion, the most unsettling part was never the shouting or the fights we already saw, but the way personal details continued to circulate as if the breakup never revoked permission. This is where the story gets uncomfortable, because breakups are supposed to come with closed doors, yet Liz's private world stayed oddly reachable. Her health struggles, her engagement, her movements, all discussed with an ease that suggested someone still knew too much. Control does not always look like domination. Sometimes it looks like familiarity overstaying its welcome, and exposure dressed up as concern. When people online started piecing together details Liz never shared herself, the question shifted from why Liz keeps ending up in headlines to who kept holding the map after the relationship ended, and why letting go seemed harder for the person who claimed to move on first. Once the idea surfaced that the kiss photo might be AI generated, the room did not calm down the way logic would suggest. Because misinformation inside reality TV fandoms does not spread due to ignorance alone, it spreads because it offers emotional payoff, and the faster the story feels, the more people want it to be true. Fans did not pause to ask where the image came from, or why the lighting felt off, or why the context kept shifting. They shared it because it fit a narrative they already believed. Liz equals chaos, Liz equals mess, Liz equals another headline waiting to happen, and when a rumor confirms bias. Truth loses the race before it even leaves the starting line. Pylons work because they turn shame into a group activity, where no single person feels responsible, yet everyone participates. And in reality TV spaces, outrage acts like social glue, pulling strangers together through shared judgment rather than shared understanding. People wanted the photo to be real because it allowed them to simplify Liz into a character again, not a person managing illness, stress, and rebuilding her life. And once someone becomes a character, empathy stops being required. In my opinion, the most revealing part of this moment was not how quickly the image spread, but how slow the correction moved, because retractions do not give the same dopamine hit as accusation, and apology never trends the way scandal does. This is where shame turns into currency, because attention rewards the loudest take, not the careful one, and every repost quietly told Liz that her privacy still belonged to the crowd. Even after the possibility of AI entered the conversation, the damage did not rewind. Screenshots stayed saved, opinions stayed formed, and assumptions stayed sticky, proving that truth does not erase impact once a story embeds itself in public memory. The kiss did not need to be real to cost her peace, because the accusation alone reopened wounds wounds she had been trying to close, and the fallout landed exactly the same, raising the unsettling realization that in this ecosystem, facts do not protect you once the story has already decided who you are. When Liz finally spoke about her health, the noise around her softened in a way gossip never allows, because cancer has a way of pulling attention out of rumor and forcing it into reality, and her words carried weight without performance, without pleading, without asking strangers for sympathy. She did not frame her story as inspiration or tragedy. She spoke plainly about ovarian cancer returning, about doctors finding another mass, about the next step being a hysterectomy, and the calm in her tone made the moment heavier than any dramatic reveal could. This was not a storyline update, this was a body under pressure, and the shift mattered because it asked the audience to slow down and listen instead of react. What built trust here was restraint, because Liz did not overshare, she did not posture, and she did not weaponize her pain for attention. She shared enough to explain why rumors felt cruel, and why privacy stopped being optional and started being necessary. In my opinion, the power of this moment sat in what she left unsaid. The fear behind medical words, the exhaustion behind constant explanation, and the quiet choice to step back from noise while facing something personal and frightening. Compassion does not require tears or dramatic pauses. Sometimes it grows through steady honesty, and that steadiness made her feel human again to people who had been trained to see her as content. Then the story took a turn that unsettled more than any headline, because as Liz spoke, it became clear that details about her health had circulated before she shared them publicly, and that realization reframed everything that came before. Medical information does not leak itself. It moves through access, through trust, through someone close enough to know what was never meant for strangers, and the moment that sinks in, the focus shifts away from fans and toward proximity. The unsettling question was no longer why people online talked, but who had the knowledge early, who carried pieces of her private reality after the breakup, and why those details did not stay where they belonged, because the truth landing late does not erase the harm done when someone close already knew and stayed silent while the world speculated. The conversation shifted again when Liz claimed someone shared details about her health without her consent, and this is where precision matters, because words like leak carry weight and accusations deserve care, especially when lives sit behind them. Liz said information about her medical situation traveled beyond the circle she trusted, and she did not name motives or assign legal guilt. She spoke about impact, about how violating it feels when something as intimate as a diagnosis becomes topic fuel. Some details were already public because she chose to share them, and that distinction matters, because choosing to speak is not the same as losing control, and consent does not roll over just because someone once lived on television. The line gets crossed when private information moves without permission, even if the person passing it along claims concern or familiarity, and this is where behavior becomes more revealing than intention. In my opinion, it is possible for someone to believe they are helping while still causing harm, especially in relationships where access once felt normal and boundaries shifted after the breakup. A fair counterpoint exists here, because speculation fills gaps quickly online, and not every rumor traces back to one source, yet patterns do not appear in isolation, and repeated proximity to sensitive details raises questions worth asking without rushing to judgment. The incentive structure around reality TV does not disappear after filming ends. Attention still rewards relevance, and relevance often feeds on proximity to drama, especially when public sympathy is already primed. Sharing information, even indirectly, keeps someone connected to the narrative, keeps their name orbiting the story, and maintains a sense of influence long after a relationship ends. This is not about proving intent. It is about recognizing how power functions when one person wants distance and another remains entwined through access. Timing sharpens the discomfort, because this surfaced during a moment when Liz was vulnerable, rebuilding, and deliberately private, which invites the question nobody likes asking out loud. Why now? Why during a health crisis? And why when stepping back would have been the easier, kinder choice, unless staying relevant mattered more than staying respectful. Patterns around Big Ed start to feel familiar once attention fades, because oversharing rarely arrives alone, and often walks in holding control by the hand, smiling, insisting everything stays public for the sake of honesty, while quietly deciding who gets exposed and who stays protected. Public sympathy does not appear by accident. Sympathy gets shaped, fed, nudged, and repeated through selective vulnerability, emotional sound bites, and moments designed to pull focus away from harm and toward hurt feelings. Fast pacing fits here, because behavior speaks quickly, and repetition matters, because once someone learns sympathy brings cover, the instinct to share never switches off, especially when relevance feels threatened. Oversharing turns into power when personal moments leave private space without consent, because the storyteller controls framing, timing, and tone, and the audience rarely questions the source when tears appear on screen. This does not require insults or shouting. Control looks softer, warmer, easier to defend, and harder to call out, especially when years of reality TV have trained viewers to reward emotional access. Anger builds when patterns repeat, because distance requests get ignored, boundaries blur, and private details keep surfacing, always framed as concern, never framed as intrusion. Public sympathy also becomes armor, because once someone occupies the role of wounded party, criticism sounds cruel, questions sound unfair, and accountability sounds like attack. The crowd hesitates, doubt creeps in, and behavior slides under the radar again, again, not due to innocence, but due to presentation. In my opinion, the most unsettling part sits in how effective this strategy remains, because empathy gets redirected away from the person seeking peace and toward the person refusing to release control. Confusion joins anger near the end, because none of this requires malicious intent to cause damage, and damage still stacks either way, which leaves the audience wrestling with two truths at once: sympathy and suspicion. When oversharing earns applause, control stops needing permission, and silence starts paying the price. The noise drops here, on purpose, because Liz's unseen fiancé steps into the story without stepping into the spotlight, and that absence says more than any photo ever could, since choosing not to be seen after years of forced visibility becomes a form of protection, not secrecy. This partner exists outside confessionals, outside comment sections, outside the urge to explain, and after public trauma, privacy stops looking distant or cold and starts looking like oxygen, something necessary to survive rather than a luxury reserved for people with easier lives. Liz did not hide this relationship to create mystery. She kept it off camera to keep it intact, and the difference matters when rebuilding trust after being watched for so long. Rebuilding off camera costs more than people admit, because silence invites suspicion, and absence triggers stories written by strangers who assume the worst fills the gaps. Choosing quiet means giving up the chance to correct every rumor, choosing peace over control, and that choice often looks boring to audiences trained to expect chaos. This is where weaker videos lose viewers, because nothing explodes, nobody yells, and no scandal breaks, yet the emotional weight sits heavier than noise, because healing does not announce progress, it hides in routines, boundaries, and days without headlines. In my opinion, the unseen fiancé represents a fork in the road Liz has not publicly explained. One path keeps her inside the cycle of exposure, the other leads somewhere calmer but lonelier, where validation does not arrive through comments or clicks. Silence becomes meaningful when you realize how hard it is for someone whose pain once paid bills, whose vulnerability became content, whose name carried engagement. And stepping away from that economy feels like learning to walk again without an audience cheering or booing. Privacy stops being a preference after trauma. It turns into a boundary nobody else gets to vote on. The uncertainty lingers, because healing does not follow a script, and no one knows whether distance will hold, whether quiet will protect, or whether the past will keep knocking louder than before, leaving the question hanging in the air without an easy answer. What does healing even look like when your worst moments already belong to the public? Reality TV never pretends to stop when someone gets sick, because the machine does not run on empathy, it runs on attention, and attention spikes during crisis, whether the people inside it asked for that timing or not. Shows profit from exposure, fans reward accessibility, and the cycle keeps turning even when the story crosses from entertainment into something heavier, something human, something painful. No one wakes up planning to exploit a health scare, yet the structure itself encourages momentum over pause, because silence risks relevance, and relevance keeps paychecks, clicks, and conversation alive. The uncomfortable reframe sits here, because fans play a role even when intentions feel clean, since views, comments, and speculation teach the system what to feed next. Outrage travels faster than care. Curiosity outruns restraint, and once a story feels emotional, people lean in harder, not softer. In my opinion, the hardest truth is that audiences do not mean harm, but meaning well does not undo impact, and every share tells the machine to keep going, even when the person at the center needs space rather than spotlight. Health crises do not slow this ecosystem. They sharpen it, because vulnerability reads as authenticity, and authenticity reads as engagement. When Liz spoke about cancer, compassion surged, yet so did scrutiny, theories, and unsolicited analysis, proving that care and consumption often coexist in the same breath. The system does not separate support from spectacle, it blends them, and once blended, stepping away becomes harder than staying, because distance itself sparks more question. The machine does not ask permission, it responds to reward, and reward rarely waits for healing. This leaves the audience implicated without accusation, because participation does not require cruelty, only attention, and attention never feels neutral once stakes rise. Walking away sounds simple in theory: log off, mute, move on, yet history shows how rarely distance sticks when fame has already trained people to circle back, especially when unfinished stories linger. The question hanging at the edge is not whether Liz wants out, but whether the ecosystem ever truly releases someone once it has learned their name, and whether leaving for good is possible when silence itself becomes the loudest story of all. Relief arrives quietly, not through an announcement or a dramatic post, but through what Liz chose not to explain, not to clarify, not to defend, because agency sometimes shows up as refusal rather than performance. She did not give timelines. She did not justify her engagement. She did not narrate every doctor visit or emotional low point. She shared only what she wanted, when she wanted, and then she stopped. And that decision alone shifted the balance back into her hands. Strength here looks plain. No speeches, no viral captions, no carefully framed vulnerability designed to earn approval. Just boundaries held without apology. Short answers. Long silences. Days where nothing gets posted at all. For someone whose pain once played out in front of millions, restraint becomes a quiet rebellion, and the absence of explanation starts to feel intentional rather than evasive. In my opinion, this is where Liz finally steps out of reaction mode and into choice. chaos, because the loudest growth often happens when no one is clapping. The audience feels lighter in this moment, because chaos slows, the narrative stops spiraling, and the urge to pick sides fades when there is nothing left to argue with. Relief does not come from resolution. It comes from watching someone stop feeding a system that kept hurting them. This is not closure. This is pause. This is space reclaimed inch by inch. Power returns when someone stops explaining their life to people who never needed the details. Yet tension stays alive, because silence invites curiosity even when it protects peace, and the unanswered questions do not disappear, they wait. Will privacy hold when the next rumor hits? Will distance survive another headline? Will strength stay quiet when the machine tries again? The story eases, but it does not end, because walking away is not a single moment. It is a choice that has to be made again every time the past reaches out, reminding everyone that agency is not loud, but it is never finished. Nothing ends with a verdict here, and no one gets crowned anything, because real fallout does not tie itself into clean conclusions. It settles instead, quietly, inside choices people keep making after the noise moves on. Liz did not win, and Big Ed did not lose, because life kept moving without asking for permission, and the story resolves where stories like this always do, inside a person deciding how much of themselves they are willing to give away next. The kiss photo faded, the rumors thinned, the comments slowed. What remained was a woman choosing distance, choosing privacy, choosing health over explanation, and that emotional resolution matters more than any legal outcome ever could. The last callback lands softly, because we circle back to the start and see the difference clearly now. Chaos spread fast, truth arrived late, and healing never needed the crowd. The system did what it always does. Fans reacted the way fans always react. The machine kept turning. The only variable that changed was Liz stepping out of the frame and refusing to refill it with pain. In my opinion, that choice carries more weight than any apology or confession could, because it removes fuel rather than demanding justice. When someone stops feeding chaos, the noise starves before the person does. And yet, the story does not shut its door completely, because reality TV has a habit of circling familiar faces, especially those who appear strong, confident, unbothered, smiling through everything as if nothing ever touches them. If this journey taught anything, it is how often calm surfaces hide damage underneath, how often laughter masks exhaustion, and how easily audiences mistake survival for strength. The next chapter sits right there, waiting, inside another cast member whose public glow feels effortless, whose jokes land easily, whose smile never slips, until you look closer and notice the cracks nobody talks about yet. Because sometimes the most revealing stories are not the loud ones, but the ones hiding in plain sight, pretending everything is fine.